Hello, and welcome back to Addison, the 35th podcast, your Chicago baseball authority. My name is Herb Lawrence. You can follow me on Twitter, Ecknerwall23. That is my last name, Lawrence, spelled backwards, ECNERWAL23 for the great Robin Ventura. If you want to go to Blue Sky, if you're over there, it is herblawrence.bsky.socal social. Or if you want to follow me on Instagram and all my adventures over there, you can go over there to that. And it's just my name, Herb Lawrence, LAWRENCE. Right now, we got a guy who is very important. You can hear him in the background. He's doing his thing because Elijah Evans is a big time shooter. He is the new co host of the Call Up Pod. He is the head of operations for this very same network that we're on right now, the Just Baseball Network. He's a big time guy right now, and it's well deserved. Like, if you've been watching me on either CHGO or this show, you know, or Future Sox, you know that this guy hustles and he knows his stuff. You can follow Elijah Evans on Twitter at ElijahEV8, and he's also a co-host with Dylan Barnes on the Future Sox Roundup podcast. Elijah Evans, thank you for giving us this time today. Really appreciate you coming on.
Always, Herb. I appreciate that warm welcome there. It's very kind of you. It's always fun talking White Sox with you, man. It's something I look forward to when we get to.
Yeah, and it's like the thing is, like, this season 2025 for the White Sox, it's not about the actual wins and losses at the end of the year. And so we've gotten you on like 3 or 4 times this year because what you know about the White Sox is what is really important about the White Sox moving forward. And so it's always good to talk to you no matter what, because you know the current team and the future team. So in the vein of that, I remember when the announcement came down, there was a lot of fervor in White Sox Twitter that Grant Taylor, prize starter in Double-A, is getting moved to the bullpen. What are the White Sox doing? They're messing up another guy. Firstly, now you see in hindsight, you see what the White Sox plan all along was, because Grant Taylor's come to the major leagues and is filthy. It's untouchable. Hasn't, I don't think, allowed a ball in the air at all. What was your initial reaction to where Brian Bannister, Ethan Katz, and Chris Getz had this stud of a player go from being a starter in Double-A to doing reliever duty, and now that it's all worked out, what are your thoughts about their plan?
Yeah, man. I mean, I think you hit it on the nail there a little bit. I was definitely surprised, caught off guard a little. I think that from the perspective of like the way I've seen Grant Taylor just stuff look the past year, right? Like last year, we got a handful of starts prior to the injury. And those handful of starts, it was like, okay, this guy's an elite prospect. Like it was very clear that the stuff last year coming off of Tommy John was already better than almost everybody in the system, right off of Tommy John last year. Like that was like, okay, this guy's a huge prospect. I started hyping him up last year. I was really excited. Goes down with another injury, comes back to the complex or to the Arizona Fall League, has a couple of, shaky starts there, but you see it again. Comes into spring training this year and you see him in big league camp. And it just was like, I talked to him in Arizona a couple times and like, it was just like, okay, this guy is like, he's just a stud. Like you could just tell off the bat. But I also heard in spring training already, ooh, is he a reliever? Like, is this guy just the next elite closer? Like there was already kind of talks of that in spring training, which was interesting to me because for me, I always kind of generally lean towards the let a guy try to see as a starter. And if it doesn't work as a starter, then you can pivot to relieving in the future. With him, I think the White Sox saw it as the opportunity where like the stuff was just too good in the minor leagues, but that injury concern hasn't built up his arm. He's had these problems. So from that standpoint, like you can put him in a bullpen and know that he can succeed at the big league level immediately, right? Which we've seen he's done. Like it's not like he's just succeeding, right? Like, yeah, he had that one start to give up a couple runs, sure, but like every metric you look at shows a guy that is like already one of the better relievers in baseball, frankly. Like the stuff is that good. He gets the most, he's 7.4 feet of extension. He gets down the mound like crazy. He's averaging over 99 in the fastball. He's consistently pumping 101, 102, right? He's striking out guys at nearly a 30% clip. He's walked one batter now in 8 games. Like he doesn't walk guys either. That's the crazy thing about Taylor is the stuff is that good and the command is also that good. So definitely surprising to see the way they took it with him. But when you start to really think about it and you start to look at it, and honestly, I have to admit I've shifted my perspective a little. I still think there would have been some value in having him start all season, but clearly the organization knows that his body and his arm is in a place where it's not built up enough to maintain that starter workload throughout an entire season right now. So the logic now is like, okay, you put him in the bullpen this season, let him spend the rest of the year there, limit his innings as much as you need to, because you can kind of control that in a more direct way when he's with the big league team, right? If you want to give him 3 days off because his arm has been worked hard, give him 3 days off. Like that, you can do that this entire season, because winning is not the objective at the end of the day right now. So you can kind of take him as carefully as you need to this year. And then next year you have him going into the season as a reliever, probably still, just because he hasn't built up the innings yet. But if he's a stud closer all of next season, right? Let's say the White Sox say, okay, this is our closer. Then you have the ability come 2027 to say, oh, we're going to transition him into a starter, or we're just going to let him be our closer for the next 5+ years because he's that good as a closer. So it gives some versatility there and some options for the White Sox. Surprising, but also incredibly fun to watch him at the big league level because he's that good.
And I know that the regimes have changed from Kenny Williams to Rick Hahn, and now Chris Getz and his people who are below him. I've already mentioned Brian Bannister. And so you can see that the White Sox have done this before with lesser arms like Mark Burley. I'm not saying he's worse than what Grant Taylor is, but Mark Burley's got, not the stuff that you're seeing from Grant Taylor, but people who do have the stuff of Grant Taylor's elk started the same way. We saw the Garrett Crochet do the same thing, and same thing with Chris Sale, come up initially as a reliever and then transition to starter eventually. But with this stuff, I know pretty much everybody who is a pitcher wants to exhaust every avenue to be a starter, like you were saying. And then if it doesn't work out necessarily, I'll be a reliever. I think the kid probably will do whatever he needs to do in this first year to help the White Sox and to be in the major leagues. But there'll be an itch probably this offseason. Say, hey, let me over. And like you said, the White Sox don't have to. And if Grant Taylor is doing the things that he's doing in his 8 appearances already, continuing down the line, it'll be kind of hard for the White Sox to move off of that, just to say, okay, we're going to try to not even experiment, just try to transition this player from a guy who has had arm troubles, was a stud at LSU, had troubles there, was what thought to be the Friday pitcher before Paul Skeens, and then he got hurt. And imagine, man, that LSU team could have been like even better than they are right now, who are the reigning national champions. Oh my God, like that starting staff down there was just filthy with big time arms, and that is amazing to think of. The White Sox, for one thing, I talked to Patrick Lyons from the Rockies Insider, and the thing is, I get his point. I said that eventually somebody's going to come get Brian Bannister, and I don't know if it's going to be the Rockies or somebody else to be their head of baseball ops, but his point was, yeah, he's good at his job, but it's going to be a real hard sell to a fan base to say, yeah, we got this guy from the White Sox. But Brian Bannister has been doing a fantastic job ever since he got here as the director of pitching, and I cannot speak to him even higher. And it looks like Ryan Fuller's doing similar things, but Brian Bannister's up there. What do you think about his future prospects as far as being a baseball ops guy for another team?
I would not be surprised at all, man. I think that whether it's a director of, I don't know exactly what role it would be necessarily, but if it could be easily a GM, an assistant GM for sure, because Bannister, he's turned around the pitching organization of this team. And I think it's top down. I think it's more than just Bannister. I think Ethan Katz has had an impression on this organization for sure. I think you've got a lot of guys like Matt Zaleski. You've got guys in the organization that are just pitching minds, but it's led by Bannister for sure. And I think that this is a different type of team organizationally. The organization is different from a pitching standpoint than it's ever been, or than it's been in quite some time for sure. And it's really the tricky thing with Taylor is it's really easy for people to say like, oh, we're just going to follow their Crochet plan. And like, that's not that simple. It's very complicated to transition pitchers in and out of different roles and building up their arms in different times. But like, it gives you a little more confidence having seen it been done with a Sale, with a Crochet, when you've got a guy like Taylor who's going into this bullpen role, right? So I think that the organization, even guys we're going to get to in a little bit with Hagen and Noah and some other guys lower in the system as well, like there is a plan with these pitchers, and there is a very concrete, and we don't know all the details of it, but there's very clearly a true legitimate plan throughout the organization with the way they're approaching these top pitchers, the way they're building them up, the way they're changing their biomechanics, their pitch mixes, right? Like there is some very, very concentrated, concrete plans to make these pitchers the best possible versions of themselves. And that's something that the organization has lacked at times. And I think it's great to see where it's at right now.
Let's get into it then. That is kind of what I'm thinking about. Like, I'm sure the players at all levels want to get to the major leagues or get to the next level as quick as they can possibly do it. And the White Sox seem to be, accommodating some of those players' whims. If you do well at a lower level, I'll bring you up to the next. But it has to instill confidence that, you know what? Hey, we're going to do this for your career so you can be in the major leagues for a sustained amount of time. Like, yep. I don't know what they're doing specifically with Noah Schultz or Hagen Smith. And I was also questioning the Taylor move from starter to bullpen. Yep. What are they doing with those two guys in particular? Because I know we all circled like, hey, we need to watch Birmingham Barons games because all three of those guys are down there to start the season. That's not the case anymore. Where are they at right now? And where are they at physically? And also how are they doing stats wise?
Yeah, no, 100%. It's a really interesting dynamic with these two because they've had very different seasons than I think a lot of people expected. Coming into the year, when you saw them in spring training, these guys are pumping, high 90s. They're showing out in big league camp right in March. And I think that was when it was like, okay, Hagen Smith and Noah Schultz are going to be in the Sox rotation by the end of the season and coming into 2026, right? I'm like, that was exciting. It was an optimistic view. There's been some developmental, challenges with both these guys throughout the season. And I think that that's just something that happens when you're young and you have all this budding talent, but you've got to figure out how to pitch day in and day out for 6 month seasons, right? Like it's not as simple as just, oh, these guys have great stuff. Like there is so much more that goes into that. And what's interesting with Schultz is that he was kind of struggling, right? In terms of struggling for his standards, right? In AA with his command a little bit and just kind of getting himself settled in there. But then he ends up getting bumped to AAA, and now we're seeing him kind of get pushed to that next level, get challenged a little bit here. It's been, 2 challenging starts for Schultz so far in AAA, but at the same time, that it really is not about the results for these guys as much as the development. We saw Brian Bannister, who gave some insight onto kind of what they did with Schultz in terms of adjusting his pitch mix. He was getting a little too predictable with some of his stuff, so they've kind of gone away from his cutter, which had been one of his better pitches throughout the minor leagues, and have shifted into more of this kind of slurvy slider curveball with him, in addition to his normal sinker, which has always been one of his better pitches. So I think they're really just trying to adjust what he is as a pitcher and really figure out and fine tune how to maximize his stuff. And yes, that comes with a decrease in some of his direct results, right? Like Noah Schultz could go out there and dominate some minor league hitters with certain pitches that he doesn't throw as much now compared to what he did last year, right? But that's not what it's going to matter come big league success, right? Like you can dominate AA hitters with certain mixes, but the team and the organization has information that they understand what he's dominating with at that level isn't necessarily going to translate to the big leagues. So you'd rather take this time now in the minors to really hone in and figure out what's going to work at the next level, even if it comes at the loss of some minor league stats, because, minor league stats don't matter. I think that's something people forget and something that we kind of lose track of sometimes when we're evaluating prospects, is that there is so much that goes into prospect evaluation and helping these guys develop. And really, at the end of the day, teams don't care how players' ERAs look in AA, right? Like that doesn't matter. What matters is how much you can help the big league team win baseball games. And sometimes you have to take a step back and rebuild and recalibrate an arsenal and the way a guy attacks to figure that out for the next level.
I hear you, and we give credit to Brian Bannister, and that's good to work with different pitch grips and different pitches for the players. But it takes a level of buy-in by the player to say, this guy's got the best interest in heart for me. Like, you got to give credit to Grant for saying, you know what, cool, I'm in. Whatever gets me to the level. And that's the type of thing the White Sox, no matter what the national perception is, have garnered with these players. And that's a good thing for future White Sox coming down the line. Like, hey, yeah, it's been tough to see what the White Sox have done on the field and then see some of the struggles, especially position players. But then you see wins. You see the Miguel Vargas win, the adjustment to the swing right there. And you see the subsequent, like almost immediate results. So firstly, the player buys in because the results are right there. And that's great. But the thing is, like, when you're not getting the results, and I know you just said the minor league stats don't matter. Yeah. The player has to believe that. The player has to be like, okay, what I'm doing is leading me to a level. Hard. Yeah, so the process is tough to just get my head down because I've been in Noah Schultz. I've been in high school dominating. I've been in minor leagues dominating. And now people are hitting me. The runs are up there.
Yep.
And now they're like, oh, this guy is that. With Colston Montgomery, you see everybody talking about his average, his lack of this, that, and the other. But every time I see, ever since Ryan Fuller worked with him, it seems like a more confident player. It seems like the power is still there and that player will be up in the major leagues by the end of the year if he continues on this progression. Now, that's just the mindset that a player has to take. It's like, look at the stats is not good for me. What I need to do is just trust in what the process is of these guys and put my head down. And one thing that I'm having a hard time putting my head down and realizing is Brooks Baldwin is absolutely murdering AAA. He is killing the ball. And when he comes up to the majors, he gets a cup of coffee. He doesn't get the true shot to just do his thing. And I know some don't see him as a true prospect, as a guy that you want to have on the team future. But I see him as like what Lenyn Sosa was a couple years ago, what Eduardo Escobar was 10, 15 years ago with the White Sox. A guy with a solid career in front of him, but you got to let him play. And I can see him going to another organization eventually and figuring out and having a nice, solid career. Not an all-star, but somewhere in that realm where you're like, okay, this is a 2-WAR player every year, and he does so many multiple things, and allow him just to do that. What do you think the White Sox plan are with Brooks Baldwin in particular? Because I know the WAR doesn't look great, and sometimes he looks lost at the plate, but AAA is not for him. He's proven that ballpark, and that league, he's crushing. So where is he going to find his spot as far as major league time? Because he's 24 years old. I would just say exhaust all his time, see if he is anything. If he is not, cool. Release him, put him back down in AAA. But I don't like him playing in AAA where I get Michael A. Taylor or Austin Slater and Mike Tauchman giving these at-bats where you can just have Brooks Baldwin and Josh Rojas getting these at-bats instead of him.
No, I'm with you, man. I think it's an interesting dynamic because I think Brooks has shown obviously that he's too good of a hitter to be in AAA, but he hasn't shown in limited samples, correct, that he's quite ready to be a big league regular, right? So it's this weird, tricky balance there where this is a guy who you got to remember was not even, he was a back end top 30 borderline, if that, prospect coming into last season, has an insanely impressive, rise to the minor leagues last year, dominates at every level, forces his way up to the bigs and then gets hurt, doesn't really get a chance there. This year he comes in, like, oh, this guy can be a big league piece. He's probably best suited as a utility player, but that still doesn't mean he shouldn't get at bats more days than not right now, given the status of this team, right? So I think that will naturally come after the deadline, right? You're going to move a Mike Tauchman, of course. You're going to try to move either a Slater or a Taylor if you can get anything for them. Not sure you're getting anything at this point for a Rojas, maybe potentially, but whatever it is. But at the same time, Vinny Capra, Josh Rojas, Austin Slater, I'm good with Brooks Baldwin getting those at bats personally, because at least you're seeing what you have from a utility infield outfield combo at the big league level, right? That is a useful player to have. If you can give Brooks Baldwin the run, even if it is, even if he's in a position where he has to play 2 days a week in left, 2 days a week in second base, and 1 or 2 days a week in center, right? I don't know what that looks like, but it's Luis Roberts went on the IL. Brooks Baldwin's playing center field in Charlotte. Brooks Baldwin should play center field every day until Luis Robert comes back. Why not? I don't need to see Michael Taylor in center field personally, right? There's these weird continual just trying to kind of figure out what all this looks like. And I get that, but you got to have something there to build off of for a guy that's showing he's ready to be at least in the big leagues, right? So if you want him to be a utility piece, even if the plan for him long-term is to be that bench utility rotating guy, you got to get him at bats to make that happen. So yeah, I'm with you, man. I don't see much purpose of him being in Charlotte anymore. The numbers there are just kind of silly at this point. It's what are we doing? Why is he there still? I'm just not sure what there is for him to figure out there, right? But he's still gotta, he's got to get to the big leagues and he's got to perform. So I'm curious to see what will happen, but I do think Brooks, especially at the deadline, if not sooner, should be in the lineup as many days as possible.
The three guys that have been called up and staying up in the major leagues right now, Chase Meidroth, Kyle Teel, and Edgar Quero, could not have been impressed with all three of them more than I have already. First question about this is your thoughts on the three players. And then second one, they have a good problem and also a bad problem with two young catchers that need to catch, but also only there's one in position available at a time. And you could see the White Sox kind of going through that and Should we have both catchers at the same time? Oh, what if one gets injured? That means that we got to lose that DH spot, blah, blah, blah. I know it's a really hard spot for the White Sox to, go through, because sometimes you see Kyle Teel in the lineup at catcher and you have Edgar Quero coming off the bench. I would love to see both of them in the lineup no matter what, but I understand what the White Sox are doing. Firstly, your impressions of the three players early in their career, and then also their problem with the catching spot right now as far as the getting playing time, both these guys.
Yeah, no, it's been great to see these three guys get up. Obviously, I think that prioritizing the youth has been abundantly clear by the White Sox, which is something we were both hoping for this season. I think we've gotten a lot of that, which is great compared to what it could have been and compared to the last few years, for sure. Meidroth came in hot. Meidroth has definitely slowed down a lot. I didn't really realize until looking at it how much he's kind of slowed down the past couple weeks here. It's been a rough few weeks for Meidroth, but I do think he's just kind of adjusting. I think that his type of player is he's gonna make contact, he's gonna get on base, but I also think he's gonna get pitched a little differently, and he's getting pitched a little differently after being in the league for a little bit of time now, right? So he's still gonna get his walks, he's not gonna strike out much, but he's also gonna be a guy that gets in these spells where he does get a lot of soft contact outs, and he's not necessarily gonna impact the ball at a consistent rate as much as I think some of the other guys could. Edgar Quero hasn't been up, he's been up most of the season at this point. He got called up pretty early, and then Teel is a guy who's been up, he's only played 16 games at this point for Kyle Teel, and in those games he's been really impressive though. I think Teel has come out of the gate looking really sharp here, and just the overall at bats, the tool set is looking promising for Teel. He's getting on base at a 4.11 clip so far since coming up to the bigs, and obviously I think I'm waiting for the power to come through for both those guys, and Quero and Teel. I think those are two guys that I think can have at least league average type of power, and you're going to need to see that from them to get them in the lineup. So I think that's part of it with these guys, is like you want them in the lineup every day, but you do need to see some level of impact to justify one of those guys being in the DH spot every day, right? So that's the tricky thing. But with that said, like we've been talking about, even if you're not seeing the results quite yet, I still think you just want these guys in your lineup more days than not. Like I think 6 days a week, 6 or 7 days, these guys should be in your lineup, even if it means they're only catching a couple days a week versus the other one catching a couple days a week, and you're burning a DH spot on one of those. Like it's not even burning, right? Like who's really a DH that's that much more valuable than those guys in your lineup, even when they're both taking their time to settle in, and neither of them are, have been amazing, right? But like, do we really need to see like Benintendi DH so that you can get Taylor into the outfield or Slater into the outfield, or whoever else it is? Like there's not a lot of, it's not like you're giving a DH spot to a premium hitter in the big leagues, right? Like there's nobody in this, there's nobody on this roster right now who necessarily deserves a DH spot, in my opinion, on a regular basis over two of these young guys who you hope are going to be pieces of your future. So I think that really with these guys, like it hasn't been amazing. Sure, Teal's probably been the best, but a way less smaller sample, right? Quero and Meidroth are still getting their, they're getting their timing. They're still figuring this out. They're going to go through these ups and downs. That's how it goes for young hitters. Like I think there's very few, and it's so easy because there's a couple examples in the league of like, oh, this guy's just immediately great. And like, yes, some prospects will be that, but like most prospects will not. Most prospects will get sent down to AAA at some point in their first year or two. Many prospects will stay in the big leagues, but they'll be on and off the bench for their first year and a half in the league. Like this happens, but I still want all three of these guys playing the majority of the games for the Red Sox the rest of the season. I don't see why not.
We got 3 of the 4 players from the Garrett Crochet deal already on the major league team. You already just talked about Chase Meidroth and Kyle Teel. Wickelman Gonzalez made his debut about a week and a half ago. And now in high A, there's Braden Montgomery, probably the guy I was highest on when I saw the trade, and kind of co-headlined with Kyle Teel. The Meidroth pick, like initially was like, this guy's probably going to make it to the majors the first out of these 4, but won't be as a high ceiling as the other 2 guys, Kyle Teel and Braden Montgomery. I see the Braden Montgomery ceiling through the roof. That's just me as a fan of his last year when he was at A&M, and then years before that when he was on the Pac-12 out there. Yeah. Where do you see him firstly? Like he killed low A, and he was way too good for that. Yeah. Had a little struggles in high A so far, as to be expected, but some people ask me, like, okay, I see the White Sox progressing him and progressing other players quickly. Will he? I know he's going to move quickly. Some say, hey, do you think Braden Montgomery has a shot, an outside shot, of making the big leagues this year or next year with the team?
Yeah, I don't think it's this year. I think that would be. I like the way the White Sox are moving guys, and I think the aggressive moves for some of these guys is really working well, and we're seeing it be a positive thing for the organization. This year would be a little quick, I think. I think there's a lot to love with Braden Montgomery. Like you said, he was dominating single A, gets to high A, has a really hot start there, then has a couple weeks where he slowed down a lot. The past 2 weeks have also been very good once again, so he's kind of regathering that momentum in high A. I definitely think you can get him to Birmingham this year. I think that later in the season, it'd be nice to see him reach the Birmingham level just because you've seen so much productivity out of him and you've seen him continue to be such an impressive hitter and bounce back from that rough streak he was on, right? But I don't think it would be wise to push him this year just because there's still is some things to figure out there, right? Like the cool thing with Montgomery is I think one of the concerns with him was like, oh, is he going to whiff too much, right? There was always a lot of swing and miss. The power was apparent, but there was always a lot of swing and miss in his game throughout his college experience when at Stanford and then at A&M, right? Rocked about a 20% strikeout rate his past 2 seasons in college. But then in this, in the minor league level, right? It was like, okay, if he's at a 20+% strikeout rate in college, is that going to be more of a concerning 25 to 30% rate in professional ball, right? It hasn't been. It's been 22% steady at both levels, right? And at single A and at high A, right? That's still a little high. And if that rises a lot at the next level, then you have a little bit of, you get a little weary there. But the fact that it's been basically the exact same, and it's actually gone down 0.5% since he got to high A, even with some of these struggles he's experienced, is a very good sign for him. He's still walking at, a 9% clip in high A. He was at a 12% in low A. But, it's if he can walk at a 10% clip while keeping that strikeout rate under 25, you're looking at a really good tools out power hitting player from both sides of the plate. Where it gets interesting with him is like, will that rise? And will we see some of that whiff and that swing, that chase in his game? Is that going to elevate with time? I don't know. I hope not, of course. And I think that he's shown the ability to keep it about where it's been all season so far. But that's the type of thing you don't want to rush when some of those really high-end guys that do have some command, so some chase issues at times and some whiffing, right? Like you don't want to rush that guy. You want to give him the time. At the AA level, you're really going to start to see, that kind of separation there. If he can maintain the same kind of swing decisions and the rates that he's doing now at AA, then you look at next year and you say, okay, this guy is going to be a big leaguer at some point next season. Right now, you don't want to push that, though, because high A is still kind of comparable in many ways to what he saw in college. So you need to see that at AA this season. I think later in the year, I think probably August or so, you see him get a bump to Birmingham to finish out the year. And then he probably starts in Birmingham next year. And then, once a guy in this organization, for sure, with the way the ballparks are, Birmingham, one of the most pitcher-friendly places in minor league baseball. Charlotte's one of the most hitter-friendly in minor league baseball. So for hitters, right, when hitters kind of figure out AA, they're going to be in the big leagues soon. That's how it goes. We saw it with Brooks Baldwin. We saw it with, all these other guys that have come up, right? When Brian Ramos came up originally, when even Tim Elko, who was in Charlotte a little longer, right? Like once a guy kind of gets his groove in AA, he's going to move quick. So I think with Montgomery, I expect him to finish the season in AA next year. If he comes out hot out of the gate, you could see him in Chicago as soon as June, maybe next season, right? But I think this year you just got to let him be where he is for now, really get a good month under his belt consecutively in Winston, and then get him to Birmingham for the end of the season.
In a couple of weeks, the Atlanta will be hosting the All-Star game. And with that, they'll be also hosting the amateur draft for Major League Baseball. And the White Sox have the 10th pick in the first round of this year's amateur draft. Firstly, very unlucky for the White Sox to have that unfortunate rule that the Major League Baseball just had a couple of years ago, them and the Nationals being outside of the top 10 or outside of the top 5, where they were definitely the worst team in baseball history. And that's so White Sox. And then secondly, where and which players? I know there's probably a good portion, and it depends on the teams before them, the 9 teams before them. Which good players do you think the White Sox have a relative good shot at? And is it they're focusing on more of a younger player, like a high school player, because they can probably get one of the best high school players at that position instead of going for like a college arm or a college bat?
Yeah, so this draft class is an interesting one. It's a weird draft for sure. Definitely a less regarded draft than last year, and even than the next year for sure. Next year's draft class is getting a lot of buzz right now. So the interesting thing with this draft class is I don't have a single college hitter on the board at 10 that I think is worth the White Sox time. And I think a lot of people would say that right now. I think that Ava Arquette, who's a shortstop, is going to be a guy that goes pretty early. Oregon State shortstop. He's going to go before 10, almost definitely. He seems like he's going to be in that top 5 range. Beyond that, there's really not a college hitter that I like at that 10 spot. I don't think there's value there for the White Sox. Everything I've heard is leaning high school. I think that you could go with a college arm. There's going to be a number of strong college arms that are available at this spot. We'll see how that top few shake out. Jamie Arnold and Cade Anderson are probably going to be gone. Those are the two top left-handers. But then beyond those guys, there will be guys like Kyson Witherspoon, like Liam Doyle, some other, big-time college arms that could be available at 10. And it's not that the White Sox couldn't go college arm, but I really think they, as much as they ended up going Hagen last year, right? They ended up going with the college pitcher that they trusted themselves to develop, rather than some of those hitters who are going to be moved quickly. Like you look at a Jack Caglione, who's in the big leagues already. JJ Weatherholt's the best hitter in AA right now, probably, right? Like they went with the pitcher out already last year, and I don't think they regret it, because I still think Hagen Smith is very highly regarded by the organization. But they need one of those blue chip bats, I think. I think that's the way that I see it going, and that's everything I've heard is indicating they're going to take the chance on one of those high school bats. There's a lot of really exciting high school bats. Some of the guys that stick out, I think the two that are probably gone at that point pretty much definitely are going to be Ethan Holiday and Eli Willits. Those are the two of the top high school bats who are almost guaranteed at this point to go top 6 or 7. I think probably both in the top 3 or 4 maybe at this point. But beyond that, Billy Carlson and JoJo Parker are the two that I'm hearing a lot of buzz on for the White Sox. I think that those guys easily could be gone by 10 because they're both very highly regarded. Two shortstops, very different profiles. Parker's more of your elite hit tool guy, still kind of developing into his power, finding himself. He may not stick at shortstop, versus Carlson, who's more of that, really sound defensive shortstop with some serious power upside, still kind of finding himself as a hitter though. So an interesting dynamic there. But those two, I think, are the guys that the White Sox would love to get at 10. Everything I've heard is that if one of those two high school bats is available at 10, it's going to be really hard for the White Sox to not go that direction. If they're both gone, then it gets tricky because you have a couple college pitchers on the board. You have a couple other high school guys. Steele Hall's another one I heard a lot of buzz on. A guy that's a little more toolsed out, but 17 years old, super raw, a lot of upside, but still kind of, a very long-term development guy, as opposed to the other two, which are a little more refined, it seems like. All super talented, though. I do think that high school hitter at this point, and high school shortstop particularly, of all those guys are shortstops, right, is the most likely outcome. And just another guy you can kind of put into that bucket with Caleb Bonnemer, with George Walkow, and kind of that young next core of hitters that are being worked through the system right now.
When you are down there in Atlanta, which White Sox player will be representing them in the All-Star game?
That's a good question. Oof. I don't know.
Shane Smith has struggled the last 2 starts he's had.
Yeah,
that's the guy I would say just off first blush, but it's really hard for them to go with a player because none of them really, except for Shane, who's doing well enough, but his last couple starts have been a blemish to be, included. Mike Tauchman doesn't have enough actual at bats, I don't think, and I don't know if he's of that caliber yet, but they got to send somebody.
It could be Tauchman, honestly, if he gets another 2 weeks of at bats under his belt, but it's still a very limited amount of games, only 32 games so far, so probably not enough. Yeah, I guess I'd lean Shane Smith, just because it was a really good start to the season, and he's still been, a big revelation for the organization, but I don't know, man. It's Steven Wilson. Is that crazy? Steven Wilson has a 1.7 out of the bullpen, so
he's been really good.
I don't know. It's
last year when he got sent back down, I was like, all right, that's Steven Wilson's White Sox career. He came back and he's done some work this year. He's been excellent. I hope he finds another team in the new future where the White Sox trade him at the end of July.
Right, exactly. You want to let me shout a couple more prospects here just to keep an eye on for people?
Most definitely.
We got a few more. These are guys I've mentioned to you in the past, and one of them I definitely mentioned the last time I was on here. Tanner McDougal and Christian Opper, two names that should definitely be on everyone's radar if they're not already. McDougal, was a pretty decent name in the system a couple years ago when he was coming out of high school, pretty highly regarded, but has had a lot of ups and downs in his development. Had some injuries. Last year he really struggled and really just could not put it together last year on the mound with his command. Everything in the offseason I heard from multiple guys in the organization was Tanner McDougal. Keep an eye on Tanner McDougal. Watch out for Tanner McDougal. And I was like, okay, I love the stuff. The stuff's always been good. I need to see some results from him, though. This is a guy who was in his 4th year with the organization, right? He was a high school draft pick, right? So he's still super young. He's still 22. And this season, he is putting it all together, my friend. It is super impressive for McDougal. This is a guy who sits 98, 99 with the fastball, one of the best curveballs, probably the best curveball in the White Sox organization right now in terms of prospects, right? And it's just, he's found it this year. It is super cool to see guys just find themselves as a pitcher. He goes to high A this year after finishing the year in single A last year, got pushed down to single A last year, starts the year in high A this year. Really impressive. The command is improving. He had a couple bad starts, but really just generally just looks the part. So far, 3 starts in Birmingham, like a 170 RA in his first 3 starts in Birmingham. He comes out to Birmingham, his first AA start. He strikes out 10 in 5 innings. He has just really blossomed into everything that we were hoping Tanner McDougal was going to be a couple years ago. And that's a reminder to everyone to kind of just, progress for prospects is not linear. It is not as simple as you just keep rising up the ranks. That's not that easy for the heavy majority of prospects. This is a guy who is a borderline top 30 coming into the season because of a really rough last year or two. He's going to be top 15 and he's pushing top 10 at this point in my top 30 list because of just how incredibly impressive the stuff has been this year. And then Christian Opera, on the other hand, is another guy who was a non-top 30 guy, drafted in 2023, spent all of last season in Arizona, just kind of refining his mechanics, his body, his stuff, came into single A this year, destroyed Kannapolis, gets to high A on a quick bump, for a pretty young guy. And since being in high A, he's had a little bit of ups and downs settling in, but his last couple starts have looked a lot better. And Opera is looking like another, left-handed stud in this organization, which is, it's always fun to just have this staple of lefty starters. So these two are just 2 names that, a team that's developing pitching really well, as we talked about. 2 more guys that are going to be, top 15 or so prospects in the system that just look incredible this year as starters.
And you brought up his name, and I'm always intrigued when you do because I think he's still a teenager, if I'm correct. Caleb Bonnemer, was he a second-round draft pick last year?
Yeah.
And now, he's a teenager doing well in the minor leagues. He's still got time to develop, but the fact that he's down there with grown-ass men and holding his own and doing more, hitting OPSing over 800, how's he doing right now?
Yeah, Bonnemer's in a little bit of a slump right now for his standards. I think that, the month of June for him has been definitely a drop off from the first 2 months, but it's also these high school guys have never played this many games. Caleb Bonnemer is probably at the amount of games right now that he's ever played in his life in a spring in high school, right? So he's got 3 more months of the season and it's a hard season. I think that's something that I forget even. I think everybody forgets with high school prospects is these guys come into minor league baseball having played 40, 50 games in the spring, and now they're in a season where they have 6 months straight of games every day. That's a huge adjustment as a baseball player, but also just on your body. That is genuinely just a massive change for some of these high school guys. Comes in the season he was blazing hot opening the year. He was OPSing. I think even in May his OPS was pushing towards 1,000. It's down in 600 right now in June. It's definitely been a little bit of a rough month for him the past few weeks, but in general, Caleb Bonnemer, his first season, if he spends the entire year in Kannapolis and he puts up an 800 OPS for a 19-year-old, I'm all for that. And he's also showing that he could be a legit shortstop. I think there was a lot of people that were ready to kind of just push him to third base out of the draft. And he's played well at third. He's been solid at third as well, where he's gotten to mix in there. But he looks like he could be a shortstop, which is something that's really awesome for his value going forward. And if it is third, it's going to be very good at third. So, Bonnemer is just as another high school guy, has just been a great season, regardless of the past couple weeks being a little bit rougher for him. It's super, super encouraging to see a 19-year-old doing what he's been doing in the minor leagues this year.
And to add to your point, not only are they playing a lot of games, he's from Michigan, isn't he? So these are North Carolina summers too. So it's extra hot and extra humid for him. And so I'm sure his body's probably taken 15, 20 pounds during a summer because, he's trying to build up from a high school body to a professional body. But that he's nah, we're bringing you back here, youngster. And so he's probably adjusting to all the things that happen to a young player on top of all the heat that he's had to deal with and all the, the pressures of being a second-round pick for this organization. So thank you for the great insight you've had for us, Elijah. Anything you want to add as far as what you're going to be doing and where the folks can find you here on the Just Baseball Network?
Yeah, it's always a pleasure to join you, Herb. I'm excited for everybody that's listening. Make sure you're tuning in to all of what Just Baseball is doing. We're really pumped, man. This is a big year for us. We're growing in a lot of different directions. We're going to be out in Atlanta for the draft and the All-Star game. We're doing a home run derby contest. We're doing a trade deadline contest. We've got a ton of stuff coming up. On the JB side, I'm doing the call up now with Aram Layton and Jack McMullen, which has been a blast. It's our prospects show over at Just Baseball. We talk. If you don't want to just hear me talk White Sox, you can hear me talk about every team's prospects. I'm starting looking to learn from the best, which is Aram, and he's as good as it gets in the prospect world. There's really nobody better. So it's been a joy getting to jump in and start doing that stuff with him. I'm just really fired up. It's going to be a cool time. It's, I'm very grateful to be, fully stepping into this baseball world in a full-time capacity, which is super awesome. And it's an honor for me. So yeah, I appreciate you and everybody else that listens and has supported me. And I'm excited. So stay tuned with Just Baseball. Stay tuned with Addison to 35th. It's a lot coming up, and it's gonna keep getting better. July is like the peak of baseball season in my eyes. When you don't have a playoff team like the White Sox, July is where it's really fun because we get the draft, we get the All-Star, we get the deadline. July is such a fun month, and we're gonna have so much content coming out for Just Baseball for sure.
Like you said, he's the co-host of the Call Up podcast with Aram Layton. He's also head of operations for Just Baseball Media Network. He is such a well-deserved and well-positioned and well-researched person here, and I'm so happy to have him here at the Just Baseball Network. He was here before I was here, and the fact that now he's just moving on up is no surprise to anybody that has followed his career, and we're looking forward to more progression from the great Elijah Evans. And you can follow him on Twitter at Elijah EV, the number 8. So to thank Elijah for that, we're going to have another podcast. Like I said, I taped earlier of a pre-recorded interview with our great Rockies insider, Patrick Lyons, yesterday, and we're going to have that on July 3rd, right in front of the White Sox Rockies podcast. So I know you're sitting there, oh my God, Rockies and White Sox, the worst team in baseball history just last year, and maybe the worst team in baseball history this year. I tell you what, we sat down, talked for 35 minutes. We could have talked for 50 minutes. It was such a great conversation, just like this one we had with Elijah Evans. Look forward to this one. Firstly, if you're listening to this one, great episode. We enjoyed it. But look forward to the July 3rd episode we're having about Chicago White Sox and the Colorado Rockies, because the similarities between the two teams go farther than just the similar looking uniforms. So I'm going to have that information for you. Going to have that dropping on July 3rd. Of course, this is a half and half. Addison to 35th. Ryan Herrera's got some Cubs stuff for you, and the Cubs are in first place, having a great summer. So check in for Ryan Herrera's, both his Addison 35th podcast and the stuff he writes at Just Baseball. So my name is Herb Lawrence. Follow me on Twitter, Ecknerwall23, or on Blue Sky, herblawrence.bsky.social, or on Instagram at Herb Lawrence. So thank you for our guest, Elijah Evans. My name is Herb Lawrence. Good night.